welcome back to Once Upon a Bedtime, the cozy corner of the internet where we dive into gentle, sweet fairy tales to help you wind down and drift off to the most peaceful sleep and beautiful dreams. Tonight, we're taking a little journey with a very special girl named Alice. So, go ahead, get comfy, pull up that soft blanket, close your eyes, and let's let our imaginations just float away. Ready? Let's take a nice, deep, slow breath in and gently, softly breathe out. Let's do that one more time. Really feeling that calm wash over you. Breathe in deeply and breathe out slowly. Feel how each breath brings this wonderful calmness and peace to your whole body. Imagine each of your toes, your feet, your legs, your arms, and even your shoulders getting lighter and more relaxed. Are you feeling super cozy now? Amazing. Let's open the door to our magical world of fairy tales together. So, picture this. In a super lush, super green forest, right on the edge of a quaint little town, there sat a girl, fast asleep. Her name was Alice. She had her head gently resting against the rough, kind bark of a big old tree, and you know what? There was an open book just nestled right there in her lap. How sweet is that? Above her, the tree's branches stretched out, long and thin, weaving together to make this incredible dense canopy of leaves. It was like a natural umbrella, perfectly protecting her from the bright sun peeking through, and all around her, the whole world was just singing its own quiet, gentle lullaby. Have you ever heard the trees whisper when the wind tickles their leaves? That's exactly what it sounded like. And then all the tiny little creatures of the forest, the birds, the crickets, maybe even a little chipmunk, they were all chirping and chattering like they were playing along with the tree's tune. The sound of it all, this gentle, natural symphony, it just pulled Alice deeper and deeper into her peaceful slumber. In her mind, as she slept, it felt like the world around her just softly tilted, then slowly, slowly disappeared, until it was just Alice, and she was all alone in this incredibly vivid, wide-open expanse of her very own dreams. Pure magic. Now, when Alice finally started to wake up, it wasn't to a sudden jolt or a loud noise. Nope. It was to the soft, gentle sound of what seemed like a whole swarm of bees. A really delicate, almost musical buzzing filled her ears. And the funny thing was, the sound wasn't annoying at all. It was actually kind of appealing to her. It was a pleasant hum. Slowly, carefully, she opened her sleepy eyes. She stretched out her arms, feeling that nice morning stretch. She blinked once, then twice, and just looked around. Oh, she realized she had done it again. Just like so many times before, she had fallen asleep reading her book, and she had completely forgotten to check her watch. No idea what time it was. Alice looked up at the sky, hoping, to kind of guess the time from where the summer sun was positioned. But what she saw up there, it was not what she was expecting at all. This world, this sky, it was totally, completely different from the one she had fallen asleep in. Instead of that familiar bright blue with fluffy white clouds, the sky above her was tinged with purple. It was this delicate, beautiful lilac color, just like the walls of her own bedroom. And get this, the leaves all around her, the ones that were just forest green a little while ago, they were purple now too. Even the bark of the tree she was leaning against and the grass she was sitting on. Yep, all purple. A little startled, Alice quickly jumped to her feet. What was this strange, brand new world, she wondered. She rubbed her eyes like you do when you think you're still dreaming. I must be seeing things, she thought. Or maybe, just maybe, she was still asleep and hadn't really woken up at all. She actually reached out to pinch her arm to make sure it was real, but before she could even do that, she heard it again, that same gentle buzzing like a swarm of bees. Ah, that was the first order of business, Alice decided. She had to find out where that sound was coming from. Now, the forest where she had fallen asleep? That was her forest. It was familiar to her. She knew every single tree, every shrub, every little patch of grass like the back of her own hand. She even had these super secret hiding spots that nobody else knew about, just her. But this forest? Oh, this was something else entirely. There were pathways here that she had never ever seen before. And they weren't just dirt paths. These were made with bright blue and purple stones, and they were decorated with rows and rows of little pansies on either side. And the pansies, they swayed gently in the breeze, and it honestly looked like they were dancing. It was so charming. Alice stood there very, very carefully, not wanting to upset the delicate balance of this strange new place. She held her book tightly in her hands, her trusty companion, and slowly she started to walk down the path of colorful stones. What to do? She murmured to herself. She gently bit her bottom lip, a little habit she had when she was trying to solve a tricky problem. She even spoke out loud, almost to the trees and the stones themselves, as she thought about her next move. I suppose it's possible this is a dream, she muttered. But then, I suppose it's also possible, however unlikely, that the world changed drastically while I slept. She took another careful step. It's also possible that I sleepwalked here, she added. However, it is entirely impossible that a purple world exists only a few minutes away from my house. Alice stopped and sighed. It didn't feel much like a dream at all. The world around her was so incredibly vivid, so real. She could feel the wind against her skin as it gently kissed her cheeks and ruffled her hair. The air here was fresh and sweet. It smelled like papaya and chocolate and flowers in bloom, an odd mix of scents for a forest, she had to admit. But it was lovely either way, and that loud buzzing, it was impossible for her to ignore. It filled her ears and hummed softly across her skin. She really couldn't think of anything else to do except to just keep walking. The flowers continued to dance by her feet, and they looked quite different, these purple pansies, almost as though they had these tiny little faces with eyes that were closed like they were sleeping. And then there were these faint, sweet smiles that seemed to play across their petals. But surely that couldn't be real, could it? Above her, thin beams of light streamed in through the spaces between the leaves, and Alice used them to guide her way. She couldn't see the end of the path, and she had no idea where it led, but it seemed like the best direction for her to go. Looking around, she could see rows and rows of trees and flowers in every single color of the rainbow. They were almost too dazzling to look at. They were so bright and beautiful. And just like the pansies, it seemed as though at any moment they might suddenly begin to dance or even smile. The gentle buzzing, although still quiet, grew louder and louder as she walked along the path. And then Alice had an idea. She stopped for a moment and carefully set her book down on the soft grass. She bent down until her ear was pressed right against the ground and her hands were resting against the cold stones of the path. Up close, she could see them glitter and shimmer as though tiny gemstones were hidden inside them. She leaned forward even more until the tip of her nose was nearly touching one of the purple pansies. Down here, the sound was absolutely magnified. It was no longer just a quiet buzzing, but rather it was a beautiful harmony of humming. It was so incredibly beautiful and relaxing, like a lullaby she had heard once as a child. And then the pansy opened its eyes. Slowly, delicately, they unfolded, and it gazed right back at Alice. "It's not polite to stare, you know," the flower said. Alice was so surprised she actually tumbled backwards with a startled gasp. A talking flower? What? "If you're looking for a way out, continue along the path until you leave Dreamland," the flower said, speaking so casually as though it were just giving her directions to the nearest grocery store. "I recommend Sunflower Road next, but stay away from the Red Valley. It's quite intense this time of year, not very pleasant at all." And with that, the purple pansy slowly shut its eyes again and returned to swaying and humming its quiet song. Well then, Alice thought, she supposed her only option now was to do as the flower told her. She had to continue along the path. As Alice continued to walk, the forest around her started to get a little darker. While the colors were still super rich and vibrant, they were kind of shrouded in a soft shadow. It seemed like the sun here only wanted to light up the path right in front of her, almost like it was hiding a secret world just beyond the edges. For a moment, Alice felt this really strong pull, this urge to explore what the sun didn't want her to see. She noticed a funny tickling in her toes and this strong desire to just wander off. As she started to peek through that curtain of purple leaves, a thought popped into her head. If this really was Dreamland, maybe there were beds, cozy beds, where she could just lie down for a nap. And maybe there were soft blankets or even warm hot chocolate waiting, or perhaps a beautiful grassy clearing where she could just lie back and watch the shooting stars. But then another thought zipped into her mind. What if she drifted too far from the path? What if she got totally lost forever? And then her only way home would be through all those other lands the pansy had told her about, Sunflower Road and the Red Valley. Alice sighed deeply to herself. It was a chance she just had to take. After all, wasn't this an incredible opportunity to explore something truly wondrous? And so, Alice stepped right off the path. Immediately, the whole world around her seemed to call to her. It was as though the wind had learned her name, and now even the trees were beginning to hum it too. Unsure of where exactly she was going, Alice simply walked forwards, one foot after another. She followed the gentle ups and downs of the ground beneath her feet. Slowly, the world around her grew darker, but she wasn't afraid. It was like she was floating in a strange, beautiful dream, just soaking in the sweet smell of papaya and all the amazing sights around her as she went. The deeper she walked, the fainter that papaya scent became. Instead, a delicate hint of lavender reached her nose. It was a really comforting smell, one that reminded her of soft sheets and fluffy pillows. And that made her think of how wonderfully cozy it would be to just lie down for a nap. She felt as though she were walking on clouds. Alice actually looked down at her feet, worried for a moment that she had in fact floated up into the sky. But no, she found her feet were still firmly planted on the ground. However, it also seemed as though clouds had magically sprung up all around them. Patches of fluffy white material grew where the grass used to be. It looked very much like the kind of soft, puffy cloud you see after a rainstorm, but she knew, deep down, that couldn't possibly be it. What would clouds be doing on the ground? For a moment, she felt this irresistible urge to take off her shoes and just curl her toes into the fluff. She wondered what it would feel like on the soles of her feet, so she bent down and stroked it very tentatively with the tips of her fingers. It immediately reminded her of a time when she had gone to visit a farm for the very first time. She had felt a similar amazing sensation when she got to pet the lambs. She was so certain at that time that those woolly, warm, adorable creatures were the softest things she had ever felt, and that they were the closest she could ever get to actually touching a cloud. But now, the feeling of this strange white fluff tangled around her fingers and tickling at her wrists. It told her that nothing, absolutely nothing, could compare to this. As Alice found herself completely lost in the velvety touch of these incredibly soft plants, she forgot for a moment how unusual all of this was. Her worries, her thoughts, her concerns about home, everything seemed to just disappear. All that mattered now was sleep, and she was so tired. She was filled with this powerful urge to just lie down and rest her sleepy eyes, when all of a sudden, a voice, soft and sweet, floated towards her on the air. "Be careful now," the voice said. "If you lay down on the clouds of sleep, you may never wake up. Although the dreams are as sweet as honey, so I'm sure you wouldn't mind." The voice was sweet and alluring. It made Alice feel comforted rather than startled. Still, she stood upright and looked around, trying to see who had spoken. A purple cat sat very calmly along the branches of a nearby tree. It was playfully batting and toying with the lilac leaves, which looked more like soft feathers here. "They are, you know," the cat purred. "Feathers, I mean, if that's what you're wondering." He looked down at Alice's startled face and gave a slow, knowing smile. Alice felt as though she probably should be concerned. Before her stood a talking, purple, mind-reading cat after all, but she wasn't. She was simply amazed. The cat continued to play with the feathery leaves, its pink nose twitching gently as they tickled its face. Then it spoke to Alice once more. "You really should have stayed on the path," it said. "Now, unfortunately, you're lost. I wish I could help, but I have a lot of napping to do." The cat let out a big yawn. "I'm sure if you continue along your way, you'll find someone else to get you where you're going." And with that, the cat deliberately dropped the leaf it was playing with. Alice watched as it fluttered gently to the ground, and then, to her astonishment, it sprouted tiny wings and flew right back up to the top of the tree again, nestling in amongst its brothers and sisters. The purple cat then stood, stretched lazily, and simply disappeared. Alice shook her head. She really had no other option but to follow the cat's advice. As Alice walked on, she noticed that the fluffy, cloud-like weeds beneath her feet had started to move. Clumps of them huddled together, rolling around on the ground before turning into tiny, soft pom-pom balls and then, incredibly, floating away. She watched as they scattered, gently drifting off into the sky that had now turned dark. Far above her, they looked just like stars bouncing around in a cloudless night. Maybe they really were stars, she thought. Perhaps during the day, this was where they rested, Or maybe stars were just the essence of clouds that simply drifted away. Or perhaps, Alice thought, maybe she was only dreaming after all. She wasn't sure, but she was far, far too captivated by this amazing world she had entered to stop and ask herself all these big questions. By now, if this were not in fact a dream, Alice knew her mother would definitely be waiting for her. Dinner would already be on the table, probably apple pie, and her mother would be staring at the clock, wondering where she was. It was time for Alice to go home, but she had one big problem. The cat was right. She was lost. He told her that there might be someone to guide her, but as she peered deeper into the strange, whimsical forest, she saw no one, just a beautiful lilac tree and her book, the one she had long since forgotten about back on the blue and purple path. She was fairly sure she'd put it down on the grass when the singing pansy had spoken to her. Now, as she got closer to the tree, she saw that someone had picked it up. Her book was leaning gently against the trunk of the lilac tree. Tentatively, she reached out her hand and touched the front cover of her beloved book. "You're welcome," came a small voice from behind the tree. Alice quickly peeked around the trunk and found herself looking at a tiny, fluffy white rabbit. He had bright blue eyes and he wore glasses that looked very much like her mother's. They sat a little awkwardly on the tip of his nose, so he had to peer over them when he looked at Alice. He gently tapped his large foot against the ground. "It took me a while to find you," he said, before hopping right over to her. Alice was utterly bemused. This was getting wild. "Come on now, sit down," the rabbit said, tapping the ground right beside the tree. So far, listening to the strange creatures she'd met hadn't gotten her into any trouble, and honestly, she didn't know what else to do. So, she sat down. "You are very lost indeed, aren't you?" the rabbit asked, peering at her over his glasses. Thinking about how lost she was made Alice miss home. She missed her mother's warm apple pie. She missed her cozy bed, and she missed her familiar forest with its familiar smells and colors. She nodded her head slowly. "Very well," he said. "Then home shall be your next stop." He carefully picked up her book and flipped it open to the very first page. "Let's begin by reading you a story," he said. Alice couldn't quite understand how reading her book would help her get home. But then, one of the fluffy cloud-like plants floated down from the sky and landed softly on her shoulder, and the question just gently drifted right out of her mind. She laid her head back against the trunk of the purple tree and made herself comfortable. The rabbit began to speak in the softest, most comforting of voices. "Once upon a time," he started. Alice closed her eyes. The sweet smell of lavender lingered softly in the back of her mind, like a gentle memory. So did the sound of the feathery leaves floating down to the ground and then magically flying back up again. And so did the gentle hum of the pansies singing their buzzing song. And then Alice fell asleep. In her mind's eye, the world tilted slowly. The sky grew dark until it disappeared altogether. When Alice awoke on the other side of this deep, peaceful sleep, the sun had just begun to set. The world around her was glowing in beautiful shades of red, gold, and orange. She was in her own forest again. The tree trunks were brown, the leaves were green, and Alice was finally wonderfully home. And that brings today's story to a beautiful end. How do you feel, my dear ones? Wasn't that an exciting and meaningful journey? I truly hope you'll always remember the wonderful lessons and beautiful moments from Alice's tale. If you enjoyed today's story, don't forget to give it a lovely little like and share it with your friends so everyone can relax and have fun together. And remember to subscribe to the Once Upon a Bedtime channel so you can listen to more wonderful fairy tales every single night. Now it's time to gently close your eyes and let beautiful dreams take you far, far away into a magical world of your own. Sleep tight, sleep deep, and dream sweetly. I'll see you again in the next bedtime story. Sending you lots of love. Good night, my dear little friend.